Welcome to the MIDDVantage series, Exploring Careers in Global Security. This episode will be focusing on animal disease as a global threat. My name is Anya. I'm a senior at Middlebury College, and I'd like to introduce this episode's guest speaker. I'm joined today by Emerson Tuttle, Middlebury graduate with the class of 2009. Emerson currently works for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency at the U.S. Department of Defense and serves as the Regional Science Manager in the Biological Threat Reduction Program. Emerson, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Anya. I really appreciate it.
This series explores a number of professional areas involved in global security-related matters. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization, where it fits within this dimension of global security, and what your role has been?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I'll try and avoid acronyms as best I can, but unfortunately, my organization definitely has a lot of them. So I work at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. You might also hear it called DTRA. That is an agency within the U.S. Department of Defense. So it's a federal government institution. Within that group, I'm part of a team or a directorate called the Cooperative Threat Reduction Directorate. And within that program, I work in the Biological Threat Reduction Program. So a lot of different titles there, but essentially what we do is the agency's mission is to help counter weapons of mass destruction. And what you heard from the title of the program, the Biological Threat Reduction Program, or BTRP, is we focus specifically on biological threats. So when we're talking about, the global security posture or risks, I think everyone, especially given that we're recording this in right after the largest peak of the ongoing COVID pandemic that we've seen, is that biological threats are on everyone's mind. So what we do is we work to try and build up foreign partner capacity, so other countries' capacities to detect, report, and those types of events, as well as others too. So we work kind of at an intersection of a number of different organizations. And to kind of define my role more specifically, so I'm a regional science manager. My focus is on the Asia Pacific region. So I work with a number of foreign partner countries, their governments, academic institutions, to build up their ability to best detect, respond to disease outbreaks on their home soil. And primarily the means that I do that through is through working with foreign scientists, partner scientists, to essentially build up their capacity to ask research questions about diseases of concern, and to ultimately contribute to better understanding of endemic disease threats or diseases that could be epidemic threats, novel diseases like we saw with SARS coronavirus 2, things of that nature. So that's really my day-to-day, is managing a portfolio of projects that work with those partners. And we can kind of get into what that means on a day-to-day basis if that's of interest.
Yeah, that is of interest. So what does your day look like usually when you start in the morning to
Yeah, it's
long?
Yeah, I'll say it's looked much different, as it has for many of us, and during the pandemic. Yeah, so in the work that we do at the Biological Threat Reduction Program, we have engagements with U.S. government, with foreign governments, as I noted, academic institutions as well, but we also work with international organizations. When we're talking about those specifically, I'm thinking of the World Health Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, as well as the World Organization for Animal Health. Their acronym is the OIE. Which is a little bit unique, but yeah, so we also partner with those multilateral institutions as well, to where our mission spaces overlap, try and make sure that we're collaborating to the best of our abilities in specific countries, as well as at that multilateral level too. I actually learned a lot about the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, through a graduate student summer opportunity that I had, where I was actually based at that institution in Italy, and learned a lot about how international organizations work, and specifically the FAO. They actually have an entire team that is focused on veterinary public health. teams of people who are focused on animal diseases as it relates to health security, kind of the focus of what I do on a more day-to-day basis, but also development, agriculture, environmental issues, things of that nature too. So there's some really cross-cutting teams at a lot of these different institutions, as well as within the federal government. But a lot of what I'm doing is coordinating between US government partners, foreign government partners, academic institutions, and the like, to find the best projects or solutions to addressing some of those biological challenges that we have. So it might be working with a foreign scientist on developing a research question, fleshing out how they might turn that into an ultimate research project proposal for funding. It might be trying to connect some of those different research projects to government initiatives, foreign government initiatives, as well as connecting them to other researchers doing the same type of work across the region, other US scientists, things of that nature. It sounds fairly, it can sound fairly glorified in that way, but realistically, it's a lot of telephone calls, it's a lot of emails, it's a lot of meetings. And in the pandemic, a lot of that has been done from a remote environment too. One thing I'd say that has definitely changed is one of the primary kind of ways that we have, at least in the past, interacted with our partners is face-to-face meetings. And that has definitely drastically changed, as it has for all of us during the pandemic. So we've had to shift our thinking and our model a little bit to try and deliver the same type of products and capabilities to our partners, even from a virtual environment as best we can too. But that also means that I'm not traveling as much as, or really at all, compared to what I used to be doing too. So the day-to-day has definitely changed, but I think we're also looking forward to, the whole world being a little bit better prepared, and as we see kind of vaccination rates climbing too, I think we're hopeful that kind of the next phase of life will look a little different. That applies not only to day-to-day life inside work, but also outside work too.
So COVID has changed the way you're working, the way the program is working recently. I know you've been working at this particular agency for about 3 years. Has the program changed in any dramatic way or another since you've been there? And has your role changed since you've begun?
So I've been in the same role ever since I started. What I would say is that we are a government institution, so there have been no kind of massive changes to my kind of work stream or my program specifically over that lifespan. But it is as any federal institution, it receives funding through congressional, appropriations on an annual basis. So that, as things change on Capitol Hill, or as there are kind of new pushes from the federal government and the executive branch. So, a good example is we have a new administration that just came in. That new administration may have different priorities than previous administrations. That can change your work a little bit. We're kind of still understanding what that'll mean for the day-to-day environment. But I think, everything that we've heard so far is that the biological threat portfolio and dealing with the pandemic is a top priority. I think what I'm hopeful for is, a silver lining we could take out of all of this is a better understanding writ large for, not only those who are in this space, but also, your average citizen, to better understand that disease threats don't go away just because there's no active pandemic, for example. We've seen a lot of public attention on this because it's impacting everyone's lives. Sadly, some of them very, it has drastically affected some people's lives, whereas others, it has really just changed how their day-to-day works. But we've seen over the course of years where there may be a biological incident, disease outbreak that is of a lot of concern. Say, for example, you had the first SARS outbreak You had the Ebola outbreaks in West Africa. And there's a lot of attention given to it in the moment and in the response to that. I think, I'm hopeful we can work as a government and with partners to find a better sustainable and preventative mechanism to try and best deal with these types of things before they become the type of scale that COVID-19 has become. Because we're seeing kind of the wide impacts on a truly global scale that a disease outbreak can cause, regardless of the source, regardless of where it came from. The impacts are still borne out across the globe.
So are you seeing, anticipating any way that COVID will change the way you're working or change the way your program is working? And has it shifted your focus from projects you may have had at top priority prior?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of yet to be seen exactly how it will change the focus in the long run, because that's a lot of that's a lot of conversations above my pay grade in a lot of ways. But I think it'll definitely change the mentality of all of those in the field as well as those outside of it. I think one of the most kind of fascinating things to me is, you can walk down the street and ask somebody, if they know what an antibody is. And I imagine a year ago, you would have gotten a blank stare, whereas now everyone knows terms related to the diagnosis, the testing for coronavirus. So there's definitely been a big change when it comes to that. Long term, again, I'm hopeful that we can build kind of a different posture to better prepare our partners, but also those communication structures at an international level, at a U.S. government level, to address these things as they will continue to emerge. I think COVID-19, SARS coronavirus 2 is one example that sadly emerged, but there's no indication that it will be the last type of pathogen of that nature, nor is it the first. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to really pay attention to what's happened, to reflect on what's happened, and to build a preventative response or a preventative system moving forward.
And do you factor in climate change as you communicate with all of these different organizations that you're working with? And like, how big of a factor are you considering that?
It's a really good question. So I would say on a day-to-day, it's not primarily something that I think about. Does that mean that it's not a huge challenge when it comes to disease emergence, as well as just the changes in endemic ranges of certain pathogens? It is a huge challenge. I think there are a lot of there's a lot that we don't yet know. So some of the things that we or that I focus on is trying to build up a better understanding of where some of these pathogens exist, even where we know that they are or where we know they're endemic, for example. Before we even know that, it's hard to know the true impacts of a changing climate, changes in temperature, changes in weather patterns on the host range, or the endemic range, for example. I think what you're also seeing is that there are a lot of land use changes that can be tied to increased zoonotic or animal to human pathogen transfer too. As human populations continue to example, harvest wild environments, turn them into crop fields, or just as populations increase, there are more opportunities when it comes to humans coming into contact with animals that may be harboring a pathogen that has an opportunity to jump to humans to cause disease. So I think it's not, when I say that climate change itself isn't something I think about on a day-to-day, all of these things are tied together. They're all related to that bigger challenge. And what I'm really trying to do is focus on, do we know about some of these pathogens? How can we ensure that our partners abroad can have the ability to know that about the pathogens in their neighborhood, so that they could better detect, better understand when something anomalous happens? Is that normal, or is that not normal? And if it's not normal, how do we best understand it, and how do we best prevent it from spreading if it is, a disease incident, for example?
So you majored in biology while you were at Middlebury, and then continued to earn your DVM at the Tufts County School of Veterinary Medicine, and then your master's in international relations, also at Tufts, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. What did the transition period between undergrad at Mid and graduate school look like for you? And what inspired you to first pursue vet school and then to go on to get your master's?
There's a very long answer to that question, but I'll try and give the abridged version. So I would kind of first off say is that I didn't have a path set before me that I said, I know I want to do that from day one. When I started at Middlebury, I took courses in biology because it was something I was really interested in. I really liked that in that field in what I was exposed to it in high school. And at Middlebury, it kind of pulled me towards a field biology, conservation biology, ecology route, and I loved that work. Spent some summers doing that type of work, and really learned from that it wasn't what I wanted to do long term necessarily, but that I still really enjoyed the process. So I decided to apply to veterinary school actually in my senior year at Middlebury, which is a little bit behind if you want to go straight from undergraduate into veterinary school, similar for medical school as well. So I had a gap year. And what I'd say is that I took from some of the courses and the hands-on work that I did at Middlebury is that I really loved working with animals. So that is kind of what pulled me towards wanting to do a veterinary career. I actually did a 1-month J-term internship at the Middlebury Animal Hospital to get more exposure to what that field would look like, which was a great opportunity. In my gap year, I lived in New York City, as a lot of Middlebury grads tend to end up there. And I did a program where I was involved in environmental education in schools around the city, as well as doing environmental restoration work. And it was really a cool opportunity to see the city through its natural spaces, but it also showed me the impacts of things beyond scientific fields on my life and on others too. So it really gave me an interest in how do we translate some of these kind of scientific realities that we're studying into real world rural practice, and how do we best understand, or how the question I wanted to better understand is, what are the impacts of economics, socioeconomics on decision making, on how the world works. So that's really where I got the interest in the international policy degree, at the same time with the veterinary degree. So it was definitely a meandering path, but it was one that I think if anyone tells you that they knew exactly where they ended up is exactly where they thought they'd be, they're probably lying, because rarely does the world work the way you expect it to. But it was a really unique and interesting path. And I think the bottom line is, when there were things that were good opportunities that I was really interested in, intrigued me, I followed those. I sought those out. I worked hard to try and get towards those goals, but it wasn't necessarily an easy, clear decision early on while I was at Middlebury that's where I'm going to end up. It was really, when you have a series of choices, I took the one that made the most sense for me in terms of my interests and opportunities too.
You think there's one academic path or background that would be most suitable for entering into your current field?
Oh man, that's a really good question. So I work with a variety of different folks or people coming from multiple different backgrounds. There are a few veterinarians that I work with, a few with backgrounds in human health, a lot of epidemiologists, and a lot of program managers. And I would say that program management is something that, that's the majority of my day too. The science is a huge part of it, but also just understanding how to take, how to build a project around achieving a goal and manage it to get it there. So I work with a lot of folks who are, their background is in international relations, politics, or program management, logistics specialists, acquisition specialists. And I work in an institution at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency that is civilian, federal staff as well as military too. So there are some who come from a military background who have completely different skill sets when it comes to their understanding of acquisitions or how to achieve a program within the U.S. Department of Defense that I had no idea when I came into the organization. So we really do have, there's no clear, if you want to get here, study this. I think the thing that I learn more and more as I spend more time in my career field and in every opportunity I have to reflect back from where I've come, it's really the thing that gets me to where I need to go is communication. Understanding how to effectively communicate with people and communicate goals, objectives clearly, both written, verbal, all of the above is the crux of so much of what we do. And I think that's really been important for a lot of people to understand or better understand during the pandemic too, because a lot of communication styles have changed given that it's a lot virtual instead of in person too. So no specific career path, but I think that should also, if anyone's interested in this type of field, that means there's a lot of entryways too.
Where were you able to fine tune your communication skills? Is there any one point that you can
Great question.
call?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people have an impression that a veterinarian is primarily an animal person that works with animals and that's what they do. When you are working in a veterinary clinic, and I spent time working in a clinic, your primary job is communication. It is obviously you have to work with the patient, the animal in that case, to best understand what could be going wrong with it, work with the owner to best understand what they have seen, some of the history behind what's going on. So you're having to probe and ask questions while at the same time, learning from what's in front of you physically with the animal, and then having to communicate different options to better kind of appreciate what's going on. It could be there's a quick fix and we need to take a few different samples to best know what's going on, confirm what we think is going on. Or it could be we really don't have a clear picture of what is happening right now. Here are the multiple options that we can, or routes that we can take. Here's the different risks that each of those involve, as well as here is the financial implications of each one of those paths too. I learned more about communication working in a veterinary clinic than I think if I had to say that there was one skill that I learned above all others, it was communication. It was working with people. It was problem solving. It was risk communication. It was also, having an appropriate amount of empathy for, people, knowing where they're coming from when they're bringing their animal in to see you, while at the same time being able to separate yourself from that and provide the options in a very logical manner too. So it was very impactful in shaping the way I think I look at the world, but also just in my day-to-day communication styles too.
Have you ever considered working in a clinic or working in a veterinary facility?
Yeah, so I did after finishing up my veterinary degree. I did a small animal internship at North Carolina State University. So that's a very intensive program, mainly working with dogs and cats
Mhm.
in that program. I haven't spent much time in a clinic since that time. And I have a lot of respect for all my colleagues who went on to do, residencies, as well as all of those from veterinary school who continue to be champions in the field at local hospitals around the country. Um, it's something that I really enjoyed it, but it was also quite draining in a lot of ways. And I did have this interest in kind of what I would call a non-traditional career field for veterinarians. And that was really kind of forged through some work I did during my graduate studies, time abroad doing, research projects on disease I spent a few summers focused on the challenge of foot and mouth disease, which is a disease of cloven-hoofed animals, cow, sheep, in the Horn of Africa, in Ethiopia and the surrounding area, including a summer spent out there. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the kind of the complexity of some of these challenges. And that is really where my mind gravitated towards, even after spending time in the clinic, is how can I try and best answer some of those big questions, though still got a lot of enjoyment out of working at a smaller scale when you're talking about working with direct patients, direct clients in the clinic too. It's just a very different type of problem solving that you're looking at. And I would also say that there's the one thing that I've definitely lost is the having problems that give you instant gratification, whether positive or negative. I guess it's not gratification when it's negative, but conclusions are not on the scale of hours, on the scale of days. They're on the scale of months, years, decades, or maybe sometimes we never get to the complete answer. So what I mean to say is that sometimes I wouldn't say that we never see the answers or the results, because I think part of achieving those results can be the path itself. It's not necessarily that there needs to be an answer at the end. But when we're talking about the role of a specific pathogen, for example, it's much bigger than just what is the host animal that this pathogen might reside in, or where is it located. There are also questions of movement of animals, movement of people, as you noted as well, kind of changes in climate. Everything is interwoven together, so it can be really hard to tease apart the exact because we did X, Y happened. Those happen. Those things are all kind of linked together, hard to tease apart, and also happening in an increasingly complex environment too, when we're talking about the world today. So, what does success look like? I think there are many different kind of views of what success could look like. From my personal view, I think we have seen partners who are able to better respond or detect an outbreak, for example. We had partners that we worked with that were some of the first to detect SARS coronavirus, outside of China, for example. That's a huge success. I think there are also successes when it comes to a team of researchers that I'm working with who are able to present some of their work in an international forum and really share the knowledge that they've gained with others, that may help someone that you never worked with down the line because they were able to learn something from the journey that some of your partners took. I think it also, at the end of the day, what success looks like when we're talking about a national security mission, and that's primarily what our program's mission is better protecting the U.S., its interests abroad, our military posted abroad, as well as the day-to-day life that we have here in the continental United States, and beyond, because we've seen with this pandemic that we're not immune to those types of things, and diseases really don't have borders, especially as we've created a very globalized economy and world where I can travel to go see, or before the pandemic, I could travel halfway across the world in about 30 hours. That means I could also be bringing whatever pathogens I may be harboring asymptomatically across the world with me. And they might end up in a space there that they could really take hold in a way that we didn't expect, because you have naive populations, for example, populations that have never seen a certain bug. So there are kind of many ways that can really rear its head, but I think it's the challenges are becoming increasingly complex, and we're trying to best work within that complex space to understand what those threats are.
Do you have any advice for undergraduates looking for entry points into your field?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I think I kind of hit on one earlier, is that, communication is key. I think take every opportunity to learn from people, whether it's verbal, written, oral communications of all kinds. I think, getting the chance to pick people's brains who have taken a variety of different career paths, and knowing that there are a lot of opportunities out there that you might not know about today that could really interest you. So don't close your mind to say, I came in wanting to do X, Y, and Z, so therefore I have to do X, Y, and Z. If I had that approach, I wouldn't end up where I am. I wouldn't have ended up where I am today. So in my transition between the clinic and working in the federal government, I actually pursued a fellowship through the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. And what they do is they take individuals with an interest in policy, with a background, where they have professional degrees or PhDs in a specific scientific field, and they bring them on to be scientific advisors in the federal government, whether that's in the executive branch. So when you're thinking of that, my pathway was through the Department of Defense, others who are at Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of State, National Institutes of Health, you name it. They also have a branch that puts scientific experts in congressional offices too, so advising Congress people on their day-to-day functions, working on committees, helping draft legislation, for example. And I had a colleague who went to Tufts Veterinary School with me, who ended up doing a congressional fellowship and was drafting legislation around One Health, the concept of that health is interlinked between animals, humans, and the environment. So there are a lot of opportunities there. And that was really my chance to go from working in a clinic to what are the opportunities in the federal government. I'm in a different office now than when I was in that fellowship, but the fellowship was my entryway into understanding the federal government. And I ended up in a Department of Defense office because I got a great offer from a great team at that within the DoD for the fellowship. And it was really, I never saw myself as someone working for the Department of Defense. I'll say that. I'm glad that I am, because I'm really passionate about what we do, especially in the biological threat reduction program and the mission that we have. But I was really going into that fellowship trying to best understand this, whether you like it or not, the DoD is one of the biggest institutions in the world in terms of its funding, in terms of its size. So my approach to it was, I have an opportunity to be a part of that and to really learn about it. So even if I find it's not the career field for me, I will have a skill set that a lot of different institutions will look highly upon, because they'll say he understands how DoD funding works. because there are a lot of academic grants, for example, research grants that work and partner with the Department of Defense. So it was a great opportunity, and it led me to where I am today. Oh, apologies, just hit the screen. It led me to where I am today, and it continues to be a challenging but rewarding ride.
How did you find the fellowship opportunity? Was that something that was brought to you by a professor, by a friend, or is that something you came to on your own?
Yeah, classmates, actually. So I would say that, though my specific path might be different, a lot of what I have done, I've learned from the expertise of others, following in other people's footsteps. So I had some veterinary colleagues who did the fellowship before me, and I, learned from them. I had one who worked at the National Science Foundation, and I even interviewed with her office when I was applying for the fellowship. So it's really learning from the opportunities around you, and especially those that other classmates have taken advantage of, or mentors might know of that you don't have visibility on, and then taking the opportunity in the direction that you want it to go. So it really was keeping my eyes open, keeping my ears open, and following it when the opportunity arose. I think also what I'd say is pursue where your interests lie. I think there are a lot of options when it comes to the course offerings at Middlebury. When I was there, and I'm sure now, in a range of different subjects. One thing that really helped me was breadth, as opposed to depth. So that is part of the reason I really pursued the degree in international policies, because I wanted to learn more about economics. I wanted to learn more about, environmental policy that I had missed while I was at Middlebury, for example. I wanted to learn about international negotiations and how countries interact with each other in a different way, because I had really been focused on the hard science when I was at school. So there are different career paths that demand different things from you when it comes to courses or preparation, but I think you're never going to go wrong if you become somewhat of a generalist in terms of, or pursue your interests as far as they go when it comes to breadth. But obviously there is a balance there too, because, for example, applying to veterinary school, it's the same requirements as applying to medical school when I was at Middlebury, and that's a big course burden. So if you do have one of those bigger goals, don't ignore that, but I think take advantage of the opportunities at Middlebury or other undergraduate institutions, summer opportunities, J-term opportunities specifically, to really pursue some of those interests that may be things you've always wanted to learn more about, but aren't specifically in your school or career plan, because I think those can really provide you with a lot of insights, or at least you'll learn something, even if that learning something is, hey, I didn't really like that, I want to go pursue something else.
So I think we're running out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I wanted to thank you again for joining us today and your engagement as we help students prepare for their first career destinations.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I want to say thank you to everyone watching. And this concludes our episode, Animal Disease as a Global Threat, in our MIDDVantage series, exploring careers in global security. I'd like to encourage viewers to continue tuning in for career perspectives and advice from a number of professionals and a broad variety of organizations as this series continues. Past episodes can be accessed in this and our other MIDDVantage series through the Middlebury Center for Careers and Internships website. Thank you again for watching.